Hi, everyone, and welcome once again to a Hobby Memorial Library virtual event. I'm Cindy Oser, and we have a very special guest today, and her pet that will probably show up soon, Greenlee. But this is Yvette Stewart. She is with Audubon, Texas, and she has some amazing information about bird watching and birds in general. So I am very excited to hear you speak today. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I can't wait to talk about birds and what Audubon, Texas is doing for birds.
Okay, well, whenever you're ready.
All right, let's do this. I'm going to pull open my screen and get this going for us. All right. So again, thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here with everybody. And we are going to talk about birds, what makes them great indicators of environmental health. And then we're going to talk about Audubon, what we're doing nationally, what we're doing within Texas, and how people can get involved. So that's just a really brief overview of who we are and what we're going to be doing. And one of the most important takeaways for everybody is the get involved piece. So please stick around for those key hints for how you can help save birds. Now, why should we want to save birds? Why are birds amazing? Well, first of all, they're everywhere humans want to be. If you think about a vacation on some beautiful remote Pacific island, birds are going to be there. If you think about challenging yourself and climbing at the top of Mount Everest, birds fly over that. Okay? If you think about, I don't know, going for a peaceful walk after a stressful day, birds are going to be there. Birds are literally every place humans are. Sometimes they are thriving, and sometimes they are in the struggle with us. We all know that urban environments can be stressful for humans. They can be stressful for birds too, but they are still there. So birds are just amazing creatures. They are evolutionary wonders. Okay. Usually when people think about birds, the first thing that they're going to think about in terms of evolution is the development of feathers. There is no other animal on the face of the planet that has a feather unless it's a bird, right? And so, of course, the feathers evolved from what used to be scales on reptiles. And over the millions of years that that process happened, they became streamlined for flight, but also fluffy and warm for keeping birds warm and regulating temperature. So that's the most common thing people think about when they think about the evolution of birds. But then we can also look at things like their beaks, right? Every species of bird has a specially adapted beak for what type of food it's going to consume. We can think about their feet. And cute little birds like this one on your screen here have little perching feet that can grab onto branches even when the bird is sleeping. We can think about raptors and their incredibly powerful leg muscles that will help their talons kind of sink into their meal. We can also think about things like the grebes and coots with their lobed toes and their fancy adaptations for water, right? So birds are just kind of evolutionary marvels. If we go past the superficial, the things that we can easily see, and look at their internal organs, they have really cool adaptations there too. They have specialized lung function where they take in a single breath. It goes to the lung and the air sacs, and it takes 2 respirations to completely process that air and exhale it. It's called unidirectional breathing. So the air comes in, it gets processed, it goes to one set of air sacs, process again, goes to the second set of air sacs, and then it leaves the body. So again, just birds are really interesting from all different levels when we're looking at their biology. And here's a little meme that I love because I think it really summarizes those cool adaptations, right? We have beautiful hummingbirds that are easily able to fly forward and backward and just gently sip nectar. And then we have pileated woodpeckers, which stab the wood with their beaks, right? So just really cool adaptations within birds. And of course, we have cultural relevance. So for modern folks right now, memes are a really great way to kind of summarize something funny or quirky. And of course, birds, you'll see plenty of memes out there if you were to Google bird meme. But then we have that deeper cultural relevance, that historical relevance too. So we can look at things like Ben Franklin and his desire to have wild turkeys represent us instead of bald eagles. We could look at indigenous cultures and what birds and feathers mean to them and the stories they tell around it. There's just a lot in which birds are built into our current lived life. There are so many unanswered questions about birds. We can think about things like migration. We're still learning about how they rest during flight, what they eat beforehand, how far they go in a single flight. Like, there's so many unanswered questions about birds. And then lastly, we can think about, what do birds give to humans? What do they give to us? The first thing that comes to mind for most bird watchers is going to be the relaxation of it. Okay? We've all had those hard days at work. If you're a bird nerd, one of the best ways to handle that stress of life is to go out and look for these little wonders, these little beautiful pops of color in our natural world around us. But that's not their only benefit to humans. They also have the ability to make us sharper, make us smarter, and to help enforce our skills. So we can think about soft motor skills, so being able to pick up the binoculars quickly and look through them. We can think about using the diopter, that little wheel in the middle, to focus on a close bird versus a far away bird, so motor skills. But then we also have the cognitive skills. We have to be able to synthesize the information that comes into us, the habitat that we're in, the behavior the bird is exhibiting, the field marks. Field marks are going to be things like the color on it, where the shape of the bill, maybe where the wing bar is on the side of its body, where one color stops and another one starts. So those field marks help us get better at combining all this knowledge coming in and then quickly turn out a species ID. We can also think about cognitive skills like our ability to hear a sound and then interpret what that means or what's happening in the environment. So birds, they do singing. Right now is a perfect time of year to get out and listen for birdsong. That birdsong is really a way of a male bird saying, "Hey ladies, come on over, check out my nesting site. I could have some babies." But there's also other sounds that birds make. So chickadees and titmice and greenly here on my shoulder are really good at making the squeaky, fussy sounds that tell us a predator is nearby, right? So when we tune into birds, we can then tune into the natural world around us. We can get more relaxed. We can build up our skills, whether that's our motor skills or our mental skills. And if any of those things that I just said kind of triggered excitement for you, there are tons of free apps that people can download easily and get familiar with your local bird species and also how to be a better birder. And so for anybody who's joining us and they have had that experience of relaxing in nature and developing their skills, if you want to share your spark bird, I encourage you to do that through the chat functions for WebEx or on Facebook Live. We'd love to hear about what's the bird that made you excited to be out there. So that's kind of like the evolution, why they're cool, what birds bring to us. But there is more. Okay, we can actually look at benefits to our society through birds. Okay, owls and other types of raptors are going to help us with pest management. I don't know about you folks, but I do not want mice in my house or rats in my house or squirrels kind of tunneling into my roof. So raptors help us keep pest numbers down. Pollination is another specialized skill that birds can do for us. So hummingbirds like this ruby throat on your screen here will pollinate our flowers for us. But then we can also look at seed dispersal through woodpeckers, through our finches, our cardinals, birds like that. Birds tell us how healthy our environment is. This eastern bluebird on the left side of the screen, this is a bird that is very sensitive to insecticides. So when we are monitoring them, they can tell us how healthy our environment is. If their populations start to decline, something is wrong. They are the literal canary in the coal mine. That saying exists because birds help us know how healthy our environment is. Okay. Finally, another important, albeit kind of gross thing that birds do for us is they're the street cleaning crew, okay? Vultures, like turkey vultures and this beautiful black vulture, They help us keep our cities and our streets and our highways clean by eating our roadkill, by eating leftover hunting materials, the organs that we may not harvest, etc. So vultures, people often think of them as like harbingers of death and destruction, like not healthy and not good for us, but actually they're wonderful. Their stomach acid is so strong, it can actually eat a deer that's been killed by anthrax and kill off that virus. So really wonderful things that birds do for us. So evolutionarily cool, really important to habitat health. If all of those things don't make you spark about birds, then maybe the monetary value is something that we should highlight for you. If you are involved in tourism, if you are a business owner, if you are a builder, birds can help your business, okay? The numbers in this slide are a little bit old. There is a nationwide consensus that goes out that kind of asks people what they do in their spare time, how they get around, what they do for recreation. The format changed in 2016. That's why our numbers are not updated. It's hard to pull information out of that 2016 report. But basically, we know that birding numbers have continued to rise. So birds encourage people to travel and get people out. Well, if they're traveling to your community, they're going to spend money in local restaurants. They're going to spend money in hotels. They're going to spend money on flights getting there. So birders help lift up our economic standards, especially in Texas. People come from all over the US to visit us in Texas. That's the history of why birds are awesome. I also want to shift to a different type of history. For any of our podcast folks out there, anybody who loves podcasts as much as I do, you may have heard of Throughline. Throughline takes current events and looks at them through the lens of history. So for us, for Audubon, what's the history? How did we get here? National Audubon was started because of the millinery trade. So the lady on the left side of your screen, she's wearing this beautiful hat with this fantastic plume on it. That plume came from birds like this. This is a snowy egret. Great egrets were also hunted for this fashion statement. And so after years of having that happen, populations really started to decline. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, two women started to have conversations with fellow women about this millinery trade, about what fashion meant for the birds. And they started the National Audubon Society. Their names were, oh my gosh, I'm going to forget their names. Mina B. Hall and Hemingway. I forget her first name. Sorry about that. But these two ladies did start the conversation, and from there, the National Audubon Society grew up. They started in Boston, Massachusetts, and then chapters started forming down the East Coast and moving westward. Okay. And again, they started this to stop the killing of nearly 5 million birds annually out of 50 different species. Those birds were often from colonial water birds. And that's a common phrase that you might hear in conservation when we're talking about nesting birds along the coast. And just so everyone's on the same page, a colonial water bird is going to be a bird that nests in large groups, similar to the royal terns you see in this picture here. We can also think of egrets and herons as doing this. And then the water bird aspect is a bird that depends on water for its food. So that's what this reddish egret is doing on the right side of your screen. It's foraging for those fish in the water. So since our beginning days in 1906 is when the first chapter officially started, Audubon has spread throughout the country. We have 4 flyways that we have broken our work into. We have the Atlantic, Mississippi, Central, which is what Texas is part of, and then the Pacific flyways. Throughout that network, 41 states are engaged. We have, oh, I'm sorry. I actually gave those numbers wrong. My bad. Hold on one second. 23 states, 41 centers. Okay, so if you look at this map, you can see the sanctuaries and nature centers are the green dots and the red dots. Okay, and then out of those 23 states and 41 centers, we have nearly 450 active chapters across the US. So that's really wonderful. Not every Audubon is going to be associated with National Audubon. For instance, I used to live in Rhode Island. We do have active Audubon chapters in Rhode Island, but if you look at this map, there are no dots there. That's because Audubon is a proper noun, and so many people can use that name, and they usually are doing work for birds, but not every Audubon will be associated with National Audubon. National Audubon's reach is far though. Okay, so not only are we focused in our chapters within the US, we have partnerships and communities throughout Central and South America that are also working for birds. We have researchers and scientists in many different countries in Central and South America. And then we can look at when we improve nesting habitat for birds, they are able to migrate and spread the joy of birds throughout the entire Western Hemisphere. National Audubon in the last 5 years or so has taken on a new strategic approach. And so we are focusing our work through these 5 categories: coasts, working land, freshwater, bird-friendly communities, and climate change. So where does Audubon, Texas fit within that model? What are we doing here? So Audubon, Texas was started for that same reason that the other Audubon chapters were started. We had that same experience of people coming and hunting our reddish egrets, our great egrets, etc. And if we think about the nature of the country in the late 1800s, right, we were still mainly focused on the East Coast population. And so a lot of those hunters and the folks that were supplying feathers for the millinery trade were going to be along the East Coast. But as those populations were decimated, they moved westward to try and find new areas to hunt. And so that's how hunting started in Texas along our coast. And then from there, after we had started to change the outlook of wearing those feathers, we realized that there was still a need to protect our coastal habitats and protect our nesting birds. So in 1923, National Audubon started our coastal program by leasing some islands and taking care of those islands, developing them for birds, protecting them for birds, I should say. Since that time, Audubon, Texas has grown. Now we don't just focus along the coast, we have a really robust program, which I'm going to get into. And our mission is to protect birds and the places they need today and tomorrow, right? So it's not just about what we can do in this very moment, it's how do we continue to provide green spaces for people and birds? How do we keep maintaining this focus of keeping birds and therefore our ecosystems healthy? We do this in a variety of ways. We have our 3 centers in Audubon, but we also have a lot of other passion and action happening. So Audubon, Texas is part of the Central Flyway. We have our center in Dallas. We have a second one in Cedar Hill. This is the only place in the country where we have 2 Audubon centers within the same county. We have our 3rd center in San Antonio. That's the Mitchell Lake Audubon Center. We also own some property at the very tip of Texas that's in Brownsville, and it's called the Sable Palm Sanctuary. Sable Palm, while owned by Audubon, Texas, is operated by the Gorgas Science Foundation. Some wonderful partners there doing the best they can to keep an open, beautiful space for people to come and look for birds. And there are some unique birds that happen in South Texas that we don't find anywhere else in the US. So the Sable Palm Sanctuary is pretty awesome. We also have our coastal program. That's our history, right? We're going to be having our centennial celebration in just one more year. In 2023, we'll hit 100 years. And currently, along the 600 miles of coast in Texas, we have 177 islands that are under our protection. Either we own the island outright or they are leased, long-term leases for property management. In Texas, we have over 20 chapters, and chapters, folks can be as engaged or as superficially engaged as they want to be. Some of those chapters are going to be just bird clubs where people get out and go birding once a month together. Some of them are going to be super engaged in trying to talk about policy, trying to shift the dynamic in our state to be better for people and birds. And then throughout our state organization, whether that's associated with our chapters or our centers, we have over 70,000 people in our state that care about birds and care about Audubon. So starting with our centers, just to give you a little bit more information, we have the Trinity River Audubon Center. There are over 220 birds that have been sighted there and registered through eBird. It's just 10 miles from downtown Dallas. There are 5 miles of trails. So anytime somebody wants to go out for a nice walk in the Dallas area, you should definitely check out Trinity River. On those 5 miles of trails, we have a wide variety of habitats, but one of the most special ones is going to be the Blackland Prairie. And so we are actively trying to restore that area for tall grass prairie species. Okay. If you're passionate and you want to help and you live in the DFW area, there's always volunteer programs at TRAC. There's also plenty of public programs. So if you want to learn about birds on a Saturday, come on down, check out the Trinity River Audubon Center website before you do and learn about the programs. And of course, like most centers in the US, we want to get kids out there. We want to get them excited and engaged about the natural world. So we offer a variety of academic programs. So if you're a teacher and you're listening to this on your lunch break, consider coming out for a visit. Next, in that same general area, the Dogwood Canyon Audubon Center, a little bit smaller area, right? Just about 3 miles of trails, but they are part of a larger continuum in the Cedar Hill area of green spaces. And so Cedar Hill as a community takes green spaces really serious, and Audubon is so happy that we are part of that, okay? Cedar Hill's commitment to green community and open public spaces is one of the reasons why we are transitioning our Audubon Center to be more of a sanctuary. And so we do have some public programs, we do have some academic programs, but we are changing what that means. And we're trying to embrace more of community engagement there. So there's a beautiful children's outdoor play center. Folks can stop by when we have open hours and check it out and play with your kids out there. We are also very passionate about our Plants for Bird program. Plants for Birds are good for you, and they are good for me, and they're good for the birds. So there'll be things that provide habitat, whether that's nesting material or someplace to hide for predators. But Plants for Birds also offer a lot of different food choices, natural food choices for our birds. And just to finish up Dogwood, they do have over 140 species that are seen there throughout the year. Coming down south to San Antonio, we have the Mitchell Lake Audubon Center. This is our largest sanctuary. We have over 7 miles of trail between the portion of Mitchell Lake that we steward and all of our basins and our trails. We have over 1,300 acres there. And then 600 of those acres are going to be things like grassland, brushland, and woodland. We use those different habitats to teach our students that come through, but also to hold, again, engaging public programs. So if you're in Austin or you're on your way to come birding in the Rio Grande area, Mitchell Lake is a fantastic place to stop by. It's a really unique habitat, and it's also a reclaimed habitat. So again, going back to our mission, for Audubon, our goal is to protect places for birds and people for today and tomorrow. And Mitchell Lake is a really good example of that, along with Trinity River. These are places that were polluted. They had been used as, Mitchell Lake was used as a sewage dump. Trinity River had been used as an illegal trash dump. And those areas are being cleaned up and stewarded through Audubon and through a lot of very passionate volunteers. Hopefully we'll see you at one of our centers. If not, if these places are nowhere close to you and you're not in a venturing mood, you're not going to be heading out to any of those, there are still other programs that we are doing statewide that are really wonderful that I'd like to highlight. So first, our coastal program. If you are anywhere on the Texas coast, whether that's Port Arthur or Galveston, if that's South Padre Island, anywhere along there, there are things that you can do for birds. So Audubon, we have those 177 islands. We're hitting that 100-year mark. And one of the biggest things that we have done in the coastal area is help reestablish brown pelicans as one of the best birds to see along the coast. DDT in the late 60s had really decimated this population. And when we started the restoration projects on Sunset Island, now called Charles Island, those areas had very few breeding birds. Now you can go out there and see 16,000 pairs of breeding brown pelicans. Okay. If you can be on any kind of boat tour, you're going to see brown pelicans flying over you. That is in thanks to the work that Audubon has done. Okay. And the other thing is our coastal resiliency is so important to everybody who lives even inland. Okay. Our coasts are threatened by things like erosion, right? Flooding. When those type of actions happen, not only do they impact birds, they impact us. So when we can do habitat restoration that helps keep our barrier islands at high levels that can resist the erosion from our storms that we're having, that's really wonderful. That's impactful and helpful. If you want to help out on the coastal area for birds and for yourself, we do coastal cleanups pretty regularly throughout the year, and especially in partnership with folks in Galveston. We have a lot of different partnerships out there. Okay. Next up, we have policy work. So we have dedicated Audubon staff at the state level who are in communication with our policymakers that go to the legislation on the biannual basis, or every 2 years, not biannual. And we advocate for science-based laws. Okay, we want folks to understand what science is telling us about the health of our planet. Whooping cranes, like this picture here, are a great example of that. Whooping cranes depend on blue crab, which is what he's snacking on here. Blue crab depend on a certain level of salinity in order to breed. Well, if you live in San Antonio, if you live in the Colorado River Basin, the water that you use in your house and flush down and then get processed in your water systems eventually makes it to the coast. And again, the blue crab need a very specific level of salinity. They can't breed out in the open coastal water. They need it to be a little bit more mild. So that fresh water that we release through our reclamation processes directly helps whooping cranes. Whooping cranes might get delisted from the endangered to a threatened list. What does that mean for us? What does the science tell us about how these birds can survive? So that's part of what Audubon Texas is doing. And if you are interested in making your space healthier for birds and people, understanding what legislation is coming through or coming down the pipeline is really important, okay? And Audubon is bipartisan. We don't care if you're a Republican or Democrat. We really just want to advocate what science tells us. What is the best available science? So we have talked to members from both sides of the party, and we have been able in our 100 years to create some really great legislation there. And lastly, I just want to highlight the work that is being done on PROs. So that's proclamations, resolutions, and ordinances. Those are different levels of governmental commitment to good environmental health. Again, if you're watching this and you're excited about creating change, understand what your local town is doing, what your larger city is doing, and what your community is doing. Well, I'm sorry, what your county level is doing. Those are all important ways to get involved. Finally, on our state level, we have our conservation program. There are a wide variety of hands-on science that's happening throughout the state that Audubon is in charge of. One of the biggest ones that we are really proud of is the Audubon Conservation Ranching Program. This is a way to help our individual landowners in the state of Texas create habitat that is healthier for birds and healthier for people. Many folks on the call may or may not know that grasslands act as a carbon sink. So most people are going to be aware of the climate crisis that's happening and how elevated levels of carbon dioxide are fostering that climate situation. Well, grasslands, because native grasses store carbon deep into the soil and create healthy soil, healthy grasslands are an incredible carbon sink. They can help regulate our climate. So Audubon, Texas is working with ranchers to move cattle through their property in a timely fashion. That helps keep that soil healthier. It helps keep our water healthier. At this time, ACR program, so Audubon Conservation Ranching, ACR, is working all throughout the Western states. We have close to 2 million acres that are certified. Specifically in Texas, we have currently 50 that are at full level certification. We are working towards another 20,000 acres of being certified, and we're really close to getting 110 of those acres done in the next year or so. And so again, full level certification for grassland ranching is going to produce beef for our industries and our local ranchers, but it's going to do it in a way that mitigates the most harmful impact of soil loss and too much carbon being put into the air. So that's just part of our conservation programming within the state. Also falling under conservation are going to be our water advocacy and understanding what water is flowing through our state. Many folks are going to know that Texas is in drought conditions in most of the state, and it only looks to be getting worse throughout this year. So Audubon is interested in how are we mitigating that water loss? What are we doing there? And then we are also interested in abandoned wells. How do we talk to landowners and the owners of those wells? How is that affecting our grassland situations in Western Texas, et cetera? Also under the branch of conservation actions, we have the Bird City Texas program. This is my baby. This is one of the major programs that I work under. And Bird City Texas is a collaboration between Texas Parks and Wildlife and Audubon, Texas, with the goal of acknowledging the great work that some of our cities are doing in the name of conservation, and specifically birds, as well as what they can be doing. We want people, again, to have that forward thought. What does it look like in your community in 10 years from now? What does it look like in 5 years? Is that positive change or negative change? Texas is experiencing a huge growth change. We have predicted about 30% population growth in the next 10 to 20 years. That's a lot of people coming to Texas. If we don't make a plan to save our green spaces in our cities, as well as in our more suburban environments, we'll lose it. We'll lose it to development. So Bird City, Texas is a program that kind of gives a virtual high five to the communities that are doing the most amount of work to preserve green spaces and doing that through bird conservation, healthy habitats. So we got Bastrop, we have Dallas, Houston, and Port Aransas. They were all certified in 2020. In 2021, we added Surfside Beach, Galveston, and San Antonio. And finally, this year, Dripping Springs has become a Bird City, Texas community. We're really proud of the work being done in all of these communities, all 8 of them. If you are interested in what does it take to really preserve land and engage the public, check out the Bird City, Texas page. We have a link. We can put that into the chat for you folks, and you can check that out. So as I mentioned, it's really a vision for excellent wildlife habitat. But if we go back to the first couple of slides, green spaces are important to people too. Remember all of those relaxation and cognitive benefits of being out and birding? Well, you can only really bird in green parks. You know, if you don't feel comfortable walking in your neighborhood, you're not really going to go outside. So think about Bird City, Texas as a way to help people enjoy and thrive when we're living in close proximity to nature. And we do this through community engagement. So things like this webinar today might get you excited and get you to go out there. We do this through habitat protection, so cleaning up and getting rid of invasive species in those local parks, and then also creating safe places for birds. So if you have a adorable kitty cat, keeping that cat inside is a step towards creating a safer space for birds. Okay. And then the other part of Audubon for our urban conservation, it's not just about big communities. It's not just about, head down coming from the government. That's not what Bird City, Texas is about. We believe the future is going to be based on our education and our engaged youth. So we have a program called Audubon Conservation Leaders. That's another part of my job. I'm so proud of my students. We have some very passionate, incredibly smart and thoughtful students. These are just 2 groups that you see here. We have our Dallas students on the right, and we have our Houston students on the left. Some of our students have been involved since they were freshmen, and they are now seniors, and they'll be graduating in just a couple of months. And our goal with this program is to get people out into their state parks, to get them to see how they can make a difference in the world around them, and how they can feel more powerful to create change through science. So Audubon Conservation Leaders Program, if you're interested to learn more about what that does, we also have a link that we can put in. It's just on our Audubon Texas page. So check that out. The Conservation Leaders Program, we do all of those things, getting kids engaged and excited about the future through a variety of methods. So we do career panels. We bring in female scientists from around the state. And thanks to our virtual shift in the last couple of years, we've really been able to bring people from outside of the state to talk about what does a career in science actually look like? How do you pursue those degrees? When we take students out for field trips, we're trying to give them new experiences. So that could just be visiting a new part of their city that they haven't been to before, but it also might be, scooping up macroinvertebrates and looking at the quality of our water. Not all students get to do that in science class. We also have physical challenges. So we might hike them for 6 miles. We might have them climb a tower. It really just depends on what those students are interested in. We are looking for representation, right? Too often the birding world tends to be white and middle-aged and upper middle class, and nature is not just for white people, it's for everybody. And so we want our groups to be racially diverse, we want them to be socioeconomically diverse, we want kids from all different backgrounds to get these experiences, and we want them to be hands-on. If I just show you a bunch of pretty pictures, that's great for a day, but that usually doesn't implant in your mind. Conservation Leaders Program is designed to get students hands-on dirty activities, picking up the trash, learning about native plants, really kind of trying to cement that memory with smell and touch and action. And then finally, it's the leader program, right? Conservation leader. And so we talk about what does it take to be a good leader? How do you learn to speak up? What does truth to power look like? Right? How do we know when somebody is suffering and just needs a helping hand? How do we deal with the scary stuff? Right? So that's what Conservation Leaders Program is. It's a wonderful program. I'm very, very proud of the students that are participating. All right, lots of information, right? Lots of history. What is Audubon doing? Why do we do this? Well, at this point, what can you do? The folks that are on this call that you're watching this, how can you get involved? This would be the question to ask yourself. What level? What does this look like to you? In my brain, I break it down to a couple different levels. Get social. I mean, this is the most basic thing. A lot of our interactions now are on social media. So you can follow Audubon Texas on Facebook, on Instagram, but there are many different organizations out there. You can follow Houston Audubon. They're doing a lot of great work. Bastrop Audubon. So you can check out the chapters online. You can also look to bird organizations like the Institute for Bird Populations, Powdermill. Those are some banding organizations that are working throughout the country. You can follow special scientists, right? Black Birders Week. Holy cow, that was amazing. And that happens every year annually. So get active on social, look for communities. My email will be at the end of this. If you're like, hey, give me some links, just email me and I will follow up with you. You could go for a bird walk. If again, those kind of evolutionary traits, if you think birds are cute and you want to go look for them, start walking, just get outside. Every little step counts. So a basic bird walk is a great way to get engaged in your local community, find out what's around you. And you can do that individually, but you can also do that with an Audubon chapter, with a Texas Master Naturalist group. I mean, there are lots of different organizations, nature centers that offer bird walks. Maybe you're not really feeling super social. Pandemic has really changed our social skills. Maybe you just want to see what's in your yard. You can put up a bird feeder. And that, again, if your cats are inside, a bird feeder can be a great way to bring a little bit of excitement to them and be able to have them kind of looking out their window. I mentioned apps earlier. There are a ton of free apps out there. The Merlin Bird ID app, the Audubon app, those are both free. Sibley's Guide to Birds, that's like $10 or $20. There's the Hawkwatch International has a bird guide. So you can download those apps and just use it on your phone when you're actually out. You could be at your kid's like baseball game and still be able to look up a bird. So apps are wonderful. And then last but not least, there are festivals. So World Migratory Bird Day is coming up. The official day is May 14th. Many communities across the state of Texas have festivals where they bring local vendors, they have workshops, they teach people all about different things that are happening for birds and for just general good environmental health at these festivals. Go to Bird Fest. They are really fun. Maybe you want something more. Maybe social is like not your jam and that's not going to be enough. Get active. Lights Out Texas is a way that we can support birds as they're migrating through our awesome state. Lights Out Texas has different volunteer groups, mainly in our big cities, so Austin, Dallas, San Antonio, and Houston, that are checking around some of our bigger buildings in downtown areas for window strikes. So for those of you who don't know, when birds migrate, they usually migrate at night. And they do that because it's cooler, there's less predators, it's easier to use celestial navigation at that point, so they can get to their breeding ground. But Lights Out Texas is essential because humans, we like to have our area lit up. We don't see so well at night. We put a lot of light pollution into the world over Texas. So as our birds fly through, they often get disoriented. They might think the sun is rising, they have to settle down. They might think that they have reached their destination. They might get trapped in a beam because it messes up their celestial navigation. So Lights Out Texas is trying to get cities to turn down those lights or turn them off. And in order to see if we are successful, we need folks to get up early in the morning and go walk around and try and find any birds that may still be alive and need help and need to go to a wildlife rehabber, or we need to know if a bird has died and what species it is and where it was. So if you're interested, Lights Out Texas, Google it. You'll be able to find groups that are doing work in your area looking for birds. And if you don't find a group, you could start one. We want you to get active. Okay, you can join a local chapter or one of our centers. Chapters, like I said, if you just want to do bird walks, we have some chapters that's what they do. They specialize in it and they're very active with getting people excited about birds. But then we also have different chapters in the state that are more about getting policy to change, talking to people, education, volunteer opportunities. You can be as active as you want to be. And lastly, if you've done these different things, if you have a posse of people who are excited about protecting green spaces, apply for Bird City, Texas. We'll put a link again in the chat so you can see what does it take to achieve that certification like those other communities I listed, Bastrop, Port Aransas, Galveston, Houston, Dallas, Dripping Springs, etc. Surfside Beach, okay? Finally, get smart. And what I mean by that is start thinking about the proclamations, resolutions, and ordinances, the legislative changes that you could make. If you are watching this and you are currently going to Central Texas College or any other university, there is research to be done. Again, if we go back to that first slide, or second slide, there's a lot that's happening within birds that we're still finding out about. Okay? And lastly, volunteer for programs. I just mentioned all of the different ways in which communities are engaging around birds. Well, whether it's a festival or bird walk or Lights Out, we need volunteers. So show up, get active, learn about your community, etc. Okay. Throughout our programming, okay, we got just 5 minutes left. We're gonna just kind of blow through these last couple of slides. So community science is another way for you to get involved. Things like Climate Watch, the Lights Out Texas cruise, which I already mentioned, Feeder Watch are all ways in which you can contribute more knowledge to community science data. eBird is a wonderful way to get engaged, but then if you want to be more personal or more interactive, Christmas bird counts, hawk watches, etc. are great ways to get out and meet with more people in your hometown. Just really like this quote, kind of emphasizes why we need people to be engaged in community science. So ordinary people have the opportunity to actively help acquire a great knowledge of the ecology of Texas and contribute to the conservation of our valuable natural resources while involved in activities they enjoy. That's National Audubon's take on community science. But what about real science? What about the more physically demanding or rigorous science? Within Texas, there are a wide variety of bird banding projects, and this is something that I'm really passionate about. I have been certified, I've taken training classes, I've done bird banding in Saipan, North Carolina, Texas, and Rhode Island. So people band birds, and again, if you're in college and you're watching this, take an ornithology class, learn about what opportunities to ban birds are happening at your university or in your local community. So when a bird is in hand, we can look at its molt. What feathers are growing in, what feathers are old, and we can learn about how healthy those birds are, okay? Also, if we catch a lot of baby birds, young birds, second-year birds, a second-year bird, just to clarify, is a bird that hatched last year and is now making its first, attempt at breeding. So we think about like olive sparrows or brown-crested flycatchers, anything like that that might be breeding in your general area. They can be an adult, which means they're more than 2 years old, or they could be a second-year bird. If we have a lot of second-year birds, but not a lot of older birds, that habitat may not be so good. If you think about it, an older bird is going to be better at defending territory. It's going to be like, hey, this is my bush for raising my babies, you get out. And it's going to push some of these younger birds who might be a little bit more intimidated to a different area. Okay? Color bands, like the bird you see here, this tells us an individual bird. What are they doing? Where are they moving around to? How can we tell what plants they're using? Right. So habitat use through color banding happens in just a more narrow area. But what the idea is, once we put this fancy combination of colors on a bird's leg, we use our binoculars to re-sight it throughout the winter season, throughout the breeding season. And that tells us a little bit more about where that bird is and what they're doing. And lastly, we can do some DNA studies through bird banding. We can pull feathers and we can look at the DNA within that feather cap. Okay. So again, throughout Texas, a lot of different projects are happening. MAPT and MOSI is going to be run by Institute for Bird Populations. They kind of approve the bander. And what that means is during the breeding season, we try and check out how many adults are around, how many baby birds are around, trying to see how many birds survive to adulthood. MOSI is a different thing. It is a overwinter habitat use. Most MOSI stations happen in Central and South America. There's just a few in Texas, just a really few number, and South California as well. Okay. Other migration stations, the Gulf Coast Bird Observatory, they do migration banding. There are projects happening at universities on Harris's hawks, on gray hawks, on Swainson's hawks, on basically every type of shorebird. So there's just tons of different projects out there that you as a student at a college could get involved in. And as you were to hold a bird, one of the biggest things that we're going to do with that bird in hand is, again, try and identify how old it is. So this bird that's on the right-hand side, that red arrow is pointing to an old feather. You can see it's kind of washed out. It looks almost gray compared to the greenish colors that are to the left and the right of it. Okay. The blue arrow is pointing to a feather that has been damaged by the sun. If you've ever left like a plastic kid's toy out in the sun over summer in Texas, you know that the sun can damage that plastic. Same thing happens to bird feathers. So by holding a bird in hand, we can study how old the bird is and how healthy it is, how healthy its feathers are. Feathers are going to help the bird fly, migrate, keep warm, display for breeding purposes, etc. And we learned all of this through the Peter Pyle Guide. These are 2 different books that are used for bird banders to understand what that bird is telling us. They're very, very intense research projects to create a bird banding manual. And Peter Pyle, Dr. Pyle, has listed all the different research that still needs to happen on specific species. So if you're watching this and you're like, cool, bird banding is where it's at. I want to see a bird up close. I want to learn what needs to happen with this bird. The Pyle guides are great for learning more about research potential. And it is 12:49. We have just a couple minutes left. Just want to show you some of the very basic measurement styles that we take when we have a bird in hand. Again, bird research is really important. It's telling us a lot about the health of our birds throughout the state. So I'm going to start this video. It's about 2 minutes long. And the first bird is a cute little hummingbird. So Tony is measuring the length of the wing. Tony has special training in order to handle hummingbirds. And what he is doing here that he would like me to note is that his caliper is resting on his hand. It's not actually touching the bird, so he's not putting pressure on the bird. This is a white-eyed vireo, and again, we're going to measure the wing length. And it's really important when you measure wing length to not flatten the wing. Now, hawks, same method. We're always measuring the wing. It just depends how you do it based on the bird. So peregrine falcon, and again, you can see the feathers are not actually touching the ruler because that would flatten them slightly and change the reading. This is how you weigh a hawk. You put it in a tube, you get a negative weight, you pull the bird out. Notice you always control the legs. You don't want to get gripped by one of those things. Safety first, grab it properly. Michael's trying to get rid of a flat fly. Flat flies are parasites on the birds. And boom, look at that beautiful hawk. This is one of the chunkiest birds we've ever handled. It's over 1,400 grams. That is a very big hawk. Here is Tony weighing a small hummingbird. So we have it held within what he calls a taco. It's really just a cut off pantyhose. This way the bird cannot move its feathers. It cannot hurt itself. We're using a spring-loaded scale here. So he's going to stabilize the scale. Make sure it's not bouncing. Make sure it's not being blown in the wind. And then he gently releases the bird so the full weight can pull down on the spring-loaded scale. And for those who are interested, hummingbirds, they weigh about 2 pennies. Put 2 pennies in your hand and it's like holding a bird. That's it. That is a big overview for Audubon, Texas, what birds are doing, why they are cool, and what you can do to get involved. As I said earlier, if you have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to talk to you. And I see there is one question in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen.
And we also put a lot of those links in the comments already.
Great. Thank you so much for doing that.
Can you see the question?
Yeah, so how, because owls are nocturnal, how do you recommend trying to locate and watch? That is a great question. There's a couple of things that I would suggest. First, many owls, especially great horned, will actually come out at dusk. So as the sun is starting to set, you may be able to find them. I live in Alice, Texas right now, and there are many times where I'll be driving home at night and I'll see them posted up. So that's a great opportunity. If you have a pair of binoculars, even if the light is low, binoculars can often help you kind of see the bird and get a good look at it. There are a couple of different parks throughout Texas where people know that owls hang out. And so you can kind of get familiar with your local parks. I highly recommend checking out eBird Community Science database, where you can look at local spots and it will tell you what are the most recent birds that have been seen. So I used to live in Schertz, which is just north of San Antonio. There was a small park there and there were barred owls there year round, and you would hear them and you would see them over the creek. So again, kind of getting familiar with your local parks. And then get familiar with sounds. So the Merlin Bird ID app and the Audubon app both have sounds available. So if you can go and listen to barred owl, great horned owl, barn owl, all of those are really common species. Maybe barn not so much, but barred owl and great horned owl, very easy to find in urban areas. That would be one really good way to kind of find local owls.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if anybody else has any questions, make sure that you put them in the comments, and we'll get them relayed. I have a question. I moved here 3.5 years ago, and I said I'm going to build a bird sanctuary, and I built this big garden, put up feeders, and I've had many different types of species of bird visit me over the years. I noticed something about birds, and specifically about pigeons. There would always be 2 pigeons that would hang out all the time. And when I would go out to put the food, these 2 would take off, and then 7,000 pigeons would come back with me. I know maybe not that many, but it just seemed that way. So what do they do? Do they do like bees? They go back and do a dance, or what do they do to communicate this?
Yeah. So I don't think pigeons do it quite so much. They definitely hang out in larger groups, but there are birds that will communicate about food being available. It might just be that those two are the centennials. They're down on the ground. They're kind of looking, and then they may fly off. But once they can see you kind of giving food, they all kind of get the okay to come back. And so a lot of times birds are pretty sneaky. Even something as large as a pigeon or a dove that we could see around our houses might be kind of inconspicuous. They might be higher on wires. They might be in your neighbor's tree. And then once you put the food out, they're like, let's go, lunch, hit it.
Yeah, and I do, like you were saying, do there's a lot of research. It paid off because I was having doves hit my window, and I started researching how do you avoid it, and found out to put white lines, vertical lines on the windows, and in front, and haven't had one bird hit the window since then. And so there is a lot of research out there, people like you guys that or finding all these amazing ways to help us not hurt the birds.
Yeah. So the American Bird Conservancy is one of the organizations that I would highly recommend people check out on social media. They have some really wonderful ideas about how humans, whether that's a large community or a single individual, can reduce the threat to birds. And so window strikes are a big thing. And going back to Lights Out Texas, turning off our lights will also help exhausted birds not hit our windows during our nightly migrations. So ABC, Lights Out Texas, both of those would be great organizations to check out and learn for ways to reduce window strikes and support birds.
Yeah, that's good. That's cool. That's cool. Well, Alyssa, are there any other questions at the moment? Not at the moment. So, well, I personally am thrilled that you came and gave us so much information about what we can do. A lot of times, just building a garden or planting a tree will increase the bird population in an area, and
Absolutely.
it's just the fact that you've dedicated your life, and your little friend Greenlee has shown up at some times and then took off at times. I think we bored Greenlee. He's like
She's
nothing
she's getting
exciting.
cuddled right now. She likes to
Oh,
be held and be warm, so she's being
oh
cuddled.
my goodness. Oh my goodness. Well, we definitely, you've given us a lot of places to start, and we truly are thankful and appreciative of you visiting with us today. You guys have so much that you're working on, and there's just so much to do, and we can all do something. We can all do
We
our
can.
part.
Absolutely. One of the best ways that you can help birds, you talked about planting plants and trees. The Plants for Bird page on Audubon, if you Google Plants for Birds Audubon, it'll come to a website where you can put in your zip code and it'll give you a list of some of the best plants that should be in your area, right? Native plants are the best thing for birds. So there are a lot of decorative plants that actually do not enhance healthy habitat for birds. So the Plant for Birds website will give you all the information you'd want to need on everything from tall trees to just small flowering shrubs and grasses that would be good and beneficial to our local birds, especially in Texas. And one last thing about Texas, we have, I think it's 98% of migrating warblers come through our state. So we have a huge potential to support birds as they come to their breeding territory, but we also have a large population of overwintering different species. So Texas is an incredible place. Everything that folks on this webinar do to enhance bird habitat ultimately helps birds around the world. So it doesn't matter what ecoregion you are in, you have the power to change the life of a bird. And I just think that's such an important take home.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. We're gonna put, your website in the comments, and guys, just check it out. All these organizations, Audubon, Texas is doing amazing things no matter where you are. And so check it all out. We want to thank you so much for joining us today. I know you're busy, busy, and yet you've taken time to do this with us. So we truly appreciate it. before you go, and guys, I just need to remind you, we are continuing to do many things, virtual event related. Make sure you check us out. The April 27th is another Night Sky tour. Then on April 25th, I don't know why I'm jumping around on the dates. We have CTC professor Dr. Mervyn Roberts, who's going to do an event on Robert Bob Gray. We have a local military hero, and so we're going to hear all about that. And then April 21st, I truly am going backwards here. We have an in-person author night at 6 to 8 p.m. And that is going to have local published authors that are going to be able to meet with them, and they're going to do some of their reading of their work. And later on today, you will get the winners, the finalists of our byways. So stay tuned for our social media. We will be reaching out. We will be putting the list for our faculty and NewsLink. We will be contacting our finalists. So thank you all. Thank you, faculty, for helping us with that. Yeah, you all did a great job with our competition this year. So good job. All righty. Well, you guys have an awesome day, and you as well, Miss Stewart. And we're just so very excited, and we hope that you guys have great success with Audubon, Texas.
Thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about what we're doing in the state.
Awesome, awesome. All right. Well, you guys have a great day, and Alyssa, if you will take us out, but don't leave yet.